Learning, one of the most important things that we all do, but also evaluation, assessment. In other words, trying to find out how much have we learned, what have we learned, where is our learning leading us to. This is one of the biggest questions that we're going to face today. So, welcome to Area 4, the area that has been concerning assessment within the project Migrant Literacies. In this Area 4, we will be looking at what assessment means, what does assessment do for teachers, for schools, for learners, and what kind of different assessments there can be. As a matter of fact, in our next 3 videos that make up for the MOOC, we're going to be looking at the following issues. First of all, we're going to be looking at traditional assessment and the obsession with quizzes. Second, we're going to be looking at the future of assessment. And third, last but not least, on a practical example from the field of assessment and learning. So what's coming up next? The part 1 of our work is about traditional assessment and the obsession with quizzes. Of course, all of you have been participating to a pub quiz, I'm pretty sure about that. But was that quiz assessing your capacity of learning? Well, let's have a look. We were talking about the obsession that has been characterizing learning and learning environments in terms of testing. Testing is seen, so please don't take it as a critique, is seen as a very important thing. Yet again, what we try to wonder here is how come do schools and learners get tested so much? One of the things that we're seeing is, for instance, the arms race. So the harm that testing can do to the learners and to what is being learned. The standardized testing obsession got started in the 1920s and has been moving onwards till the 1980s. This has been used in particular in order to provide evidence of success. What does that exactly mean? Fundamentally, if your students are having good results, then it means that you're a good teacher, and if you're a good teacher, it means that your school will attract even more students. But now the point is, what do experts say about this? Tests do not provide an objective measure of learning or a useful inducement to improve teaching. This is from Alfie Kohn, the case against standardized testing in 2000. Yet again, another expert has been pointing out that qualitative data and assessments are more naturalistic, usually gathered and assessed by observing children's performance. And here we talk about Rona Flippo assessing readers in 2014. So what is really, assessment all about? Let's have a look at this. What is this fruit called in English? We can see that we have A, apple, B, apple, C, apple, and D, banana. What does that mean? Well, we have a first word that is close to the right answer, a second word that is also close to the right answer. We have answer D, which is totally wrong, and we have answer C, which is the right one. There you go. So, no, yes, that's your answer. Of course, this is very fine. You got your test right and you get 1 more point, you get your brownie points. But what does that say about the learner? And what does that say about the content that the learner has been learning? So here you go. We found the right answer. Answer C. You found that it is an apple. Great. But what have you actually learned? Have you learned about the apple as the right fruit that is called in a certain way in English, or have you learned about how to tackle this kind of test? So when we are looking at these kind of tests, what do we assess? Do we assess actually second language learning, or do we assess the fact that there are students that are more apt at finding out what is the good answer, what is the bad answer, what is a possibly reasonable answer? So in the end, we could sum it all up by saying that test what test tests. In other words, we need to be very careful about how learning takes place. We need to be very careful about how assessment takes place. And in particular, we need to be very careful about the holistic component around the learner. In other words, look, a bunch of quizzes. But what does it actually mean, quizzes? And what do they actually do? One of the things that we have seen that quizzes or testing can do is to increase the workload stress. By relying on a study that has been carried out by the Dutch Institute of Mental Health, we're seeing the students have been complaining more and more about a stressful student life. A stressful student life not because you have too much to study and you still want to see your friends, but because it is fairly normal to have on a day a test for a certain subject, an interrogation for another subject, and then maybe another couple of quizzes. So what does that do? Does that take away the pleasure for learning? And does that give you something more? Another interesting thing that we can see is the Blik op Werk certification mark that has been at the moment diffusing in the Netherlands. What does that actually mean? It actually shows that there are certain institutions that have been competing in order to get this certification. This certification basically works to prove that a certain school has certain achieving targets. It also shows that the school has been able to give way to a certain number of students with a great preparation. In the moment in which you don't have this certification, you may not call upon municipality funding, and therefore you're going to be losing your students. So what do we have here? We have all of a sudden assessment coupled up with student success, and with funding. Doesn't that sound a little bit too much twisted? Now, let's move on to another issue. And the topic that we move on to is repetition. Repetition has been tackled by Zig Ziglar as the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment. What does that actually mean? It means that the more that we repeat and the more that we do things, so the more that we try to drill things through the learner, the more there is a chance that the learner will know things sooner. In other words, we repeat, and the more you repeat, the sooner you learn, and the sooner you learn, the sooner you can use it. But is this also really so? And is fundamentally repetition the thing that we should really be focusing on when we are looking at the learner from an holistic perspective? So here we have it. Repetition is basically the basis of summative assessment, which we will encounter now. But also we have formative assessment, and we will talk about formative assessment later on. Summative assessment basically means that assessment and feedback are at the end of learning experience. They also mean that somebody comes to know what has been learned at the end of your learning process. And last but not least, there is little or no feedback after receiving a passing grade. Instead, in the moment in which we deal with formative assessment, we find another three characteristics. The first one has got to do with assessment and feedback during the learning experience itself. As we are dealing through formative assessment, we come to a second relevant point. Formative assessment helps to adapt the teaching approach, and therefore it helps to adapt the teaching approach also on the side of the learner. What do my learner do? What can my learner do? What will my learners do? Last but not least, there are multiple moments of progress evaluation and feedback, something that we couldn't find in summative assessment before. So what we've seen so far? So far we've gone into the assessment topic, we're moved toward the 1920s to the 1980s, seeing that assessment has always been with us. We're seeing the extreme value that is being attached by educational environments, by teachers, by learners to assessment. We're seeing that assessment, in particular summative assessment, is widely spread. But we've also been asking the question, fine, it's there, but what is actually being learned? What will happen in the second section of our MOOC instead will be the following. In the next lectures, we're going to be dealing with diagnostic assessment, we're going to be going deeper into formative assessment, and we're going to be focusing also on reflective self-assessment. We do realize that our work has as a purpose the one to help all learners, but also to help their teachers in order to be able to assess the progress of their learners. This lecture concludes now with a series of references and bibliographies that you may wish to consult by the end of the video. Thank you very much for following us.